Can we all just take a moment to appreciate that if the creatives behind these films had stuck with that original design for Sonic the Hedgehog, then we most likely would not have gotten this film. Hello everyone, Happy New Year and welcome to Rewind Reviews. In this video we are taking a look at a movie that I was so excited for last year. Yes, the time has finally come. We are taking a look at Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Released in 2024 and based on the SEGA video game franchise, the third live-action installment sees Sonic, Tails and Knuckles reuniting against a powerful new adversary called Shadow, a mysterious villain with powers unlike anything they have faced before. With their abilities outmatched in every way, Team Sonic must seek out an unlikely alliance in the hopes of stopping Shadow and protecting the planet. Directed once again by returning director Jeff Fowler and written for screen by Pat Casey, Josh Miller and John Whittington, the movie stars Jim Carrey, James Marsden, Lee Majdoub, Tika Sumpter, Kristen Ritter, and features the voice talent of Ben Schwartz, Idris Elba, Colleen O'Shaughnessy and Keanu Reeves. If you've been following this channel for a little while now, then you're more than likely aware that I am a fan of Sonic the Hedgehog. I grew up with this franchise. I used to watch Sonic X religiously when it first aired. I have played and enjoyed so many of the games over the years and still do, with Sonic Heroes being one of the first games that I ever played and Sonic Riders being one of the first games that I bought for myself. I loved them then, I still love them now, with some of the modern games that have been released like Sonic Generations Remaster, Shadow Generations and Sonic Frontiers among my favourites. And when it comes to the live action franchise, I was pleasantly surprised how they turned out. The first movie, despite the initial controversy surrounding Sonic's design, was actually pretty good. The second movie, in my opinion, was a big improvement, and Knuckles the TV series was a bit of a speed bump, but I did enjoy some things about it. And with Shadow the Hedgehog, one of my favourite characters in this franchise, getting introduced in the post-credit scene of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, I was so excited for what it was that we were going to have in store for Sonic the Hedgehog 3. In the build-up to this movie's release, everything that I was hearing about it was making me more and more excited. The story, the music, the casting, including that casting rumour that Hayden Christensen was going to be playing Shadow. I kid you not, the more that I was hearing about this movie, the more excited I was for it, to the point where it became one of my most anticipated movies of 2024. And I am happy to say that not only is this a really good movie, this is by far the best in the series. The story this time around sees Sonic, Tails and Knuckles enlisted by Gun to help stop the recently reawakened Ultimate Lifeform, a dark hedgehog known as Shadow, whose power, fueled by a desire for revenge, far exceed that of Sonic and his friends. And in their desperation, Team Sonic turns to their old adversary Dr Robotnik for help to find Shadow, leading them on a global adventure. But things become much more complicated as Robotnik's long-lost grandfather Gerald enters the mix with a plan that could spell certain doom for Team Sonic and the rest of the world. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 is a much bigger movie compared to the first two films, and at times it can be downright epic too. Not just because the lineup of characters has increased, but the movie is a full-scale adventure film that spans the entire globe with world-ending stakes. It feels like a really good escalation from the previous two films where the action was mostly relegated to the small town of Green Hills. And with the highly anticipated introduction of Shadow the Hedgehog, the story has evolved into something a little bit darker and more dramatic. This film series does something very similar to the Harry Potter movies and books, where as the characters are growing up, especially Sonic, the story grows up with him. This is the darkest and most dramatic movie in the series so far. So much so that there's actually a few emotional scenes in this one. I should probably say that this is still fairly comedic. I mean, Jim Carrey is still a huge part of these films, and in a surprise to absolutely nobody, he provides some of the best gags. Yes, this may be the darkest of the film series so far, but it's also the funniest one too, at least in my opinion. In fact, most of the characters, including Shadow, get a few jokes, and those jokes, most of them are actually quite funny. I do think that it does have the same problem as the first two movies, where I do think that sometimes it can get a little bit too silly and a little bit too daft, and there are definitely a few scenes where it does go a little bit further than I think it really needs to. Like, there's another mad, over-the-top dance sequence that happens out of nowhere, and it kind of slows the pace down a bit. And I was surprised that there actually is one joke that almost breaks the fourth wall. Pretty much every scene that does involve the two Robotniks in some way can be a little bit silly, and I do think that for some people that may be a deal breaker. I mean, I thought most of their scenes were absolutely hysterical. It won't be to everyone's liking, but I do think that both the comedy and the drama are pretty well balanced throughout this, for the most part. It's a very fast-paced movie too, with lots happening and lots of story arcs to address and conclude. And I think that all of these stories are balanced out quite well, and everyone does have their role to play. I mean, it does feel like it skims over a few things, and it does feel like there are a few scenes missing, which it could potentially benefit from, but it does culminate in a really satisfying way. It never feels overstuffed, it builds on what's come before, and it wraps up so much. I do think that the pacing for this movie does drop a little bit during the second act when the two Robotniks are bonding, and I'm a little mixed on it. It doesn't really feel necessary, but on the other hand, we get Jim Carrey doing his thing, so In my opinion, I don't think it's anywhere near as awkward as the wedding sequence from Sonic the Hedgehog 2 or the rock opera sequence from Knuckles. It's a much shorter sequence compared to either of those scenes, and again, it actually was funny. Right, let's talk about the characters. Sonic 3 features the largest roster of characters so far in this franchise, with almost everyone making a comeback from the previous films. Like Tom and Maddie, played by James Marsden and Tika Sumpter. We also see the return of Tom Butler as Commander Walters, and even Natasha Rothwell and Shamar Moore as Rachel and Randall. They don't have huge roles to play, and their screen time is significantly reduced compared to the first two films, but they do serve their purpose and actually factor into the story in a meaningful and sometimes creative way, especially Lee Majdoub as Agent Stone, who gets a load more to do this time around, including his own action sequence. Kristen Ritter could have done with a bit more screen time. She is good, but her character kind of just disappears towards the end and it's never really addressed. There's no wedding sequence in this one, and there's no bowling either. The focus of this movie is squarely where it needs to be, on Sonic, Robotnik and Shadow. Shadow the Hedgehog is one of my favourite characters in the Sonic the Hedgehog games and was a huge part of the reason why I was so excited for this film. And not to brag or anything, but I did call Keanu Reeves being cast as Shadow back in 2022. To be fair, so did most of the internet. But does this iteration of Shadow live up to expectations? Honestly, I could not be happier. How they've brought Shadow to life in this movie is brilliant, not just from a design standpoint, which is flawless by the way, right down to his skates, which look so cool on screen. I haven't done this since I was a kid. I want some. I mean, I'd most likely break my neck using them, but who cares? Anyway, but outside of that, his backstory and character arc is genuinely amazing and surprisingly quite accurate to the games. Yes, they do change some stuff to fit this universe, and I know that some fans aren't going to be too happy with every change, but the emotional core of it is still there. And in my opinion, it actually exceeds what it is that the games are able to do, especially the scenes and connection that he forms with Maria, played by Elila Brown. And then, of course, the voice performance from Keanu Reeves. While I do think that there are a few lines here and there that could have done with a second read through just to give them a bit more of like oomph behind them, I do think that Keanu Reeves is absolutely brilliant. His vocals really do suit Shadow so well. He handles the gravitas, the vulnerabilities and the anger so well. I am genuinely glad that he was cast. I am honestly so happy with how they handle Shadow in this movie. He is perfect and easily one of the best parts of this film. And when it comes to the other three, Sonic, Tails and Knuckles, I love the direction that they have gone with them. Not only are we starting to see them working together as a proper team now, we're also seeing their friendship and dynamic growing stronger. Their personalities are very well defined now, and that makes the scenes between them all so much more fun and interesting, especially how they can both complement and hinder each other. They really bounce off and work well with each other, and how it is that they've all slipped into their roles in the team. And I love how it is that this movie is establishing that time has moved on and these characters are developing and maturing. They are all still kids at the end of the day, and this movie does do a really good job of reminding you of that, especially when it comes to Tails. The characters are still quite impulsive, they are still quite prone to making mistakes, especially Sonic, but it does feel like the characters are getting older. And obviously the voice performances from Ben Schwartz, Idris Elba and Colleen O'Shaughnessy are excellent once again, with perfect line deliveries. Honestly, I am still amazed just how well the animal characters have been handled across this trilogy. The creative team working on these movies do have a very clear love and passion for these characters and this world, and it really does shine through. And I am very excited to see what it is that they do with other characters in the future. Now, there is no way that I can do this video and not talk about Jim Carrey. Dr. Robotnik is back and he is even more unhinged than ever before. They don't explain how he survived the fall from the last movie, but even so, it is great having him back. And not only is Jim Carrey back as Dr. Robotnik, he is now playing two roles in this movie, as we're introduced to Robotnik's grandfather, Gerald. Now, in a change to the games, Gerald is actually alive and well in the modern day, which means that we get to see the two Robotniks interacting with each other. And I've got to say, seeing Jim Carrey playing both of these roles and how it is that he's able to bounce off himself is brilliant. Eggman, despite getting some surprisingly heartfelt moments in this, feels way more unhinged than ever before. In fact, it feels like they just let Jim Carrey do his thing. And then with Gerald, I was a little bit worried that they weren't going to take him seriously, and okay, they kind of don't, but I did like the contrast between him and Eggman, and especially towards the third act, we do see a much more sinister and darker side to Gerald. I would have liked to have seen a bit more of that version of Gerald throughout this movie, or just some more scenes to fill in his backstory, but even so, I do think that he was alright. Jim Carrey is fantastic once again though. He is so much fun in this movie, and it was a joy getting to see him let loose again, and getting to finally see him in the game-accurate suit too. I always thought if Eggman was going to get a game-accurate makeover in these movies, I thought he'd look a lot closer to how he does in Sonic 06, so I do think that how they've translated this version of him is really cool. And I will openly admit, the first time I saw the trailer for this movie and I saw Jim Carrey as Gerald, I did not recognise him under the makeup. In fact, I was convinced for some reason that it was Mark Gatiss. I mean, it does look like him. Watching this movie and seeing how the two Robotniks interact with each other, it is so clever how they do it, and it's so smooth as well. It's a very simple trick that they use to pull that off, but it is such a good effect seeing them both on screen and physically interacting. I have got to admit, I genuinely don't know how they did some of these scenes. Honestly, the visual effects in general are pretty amazing in this one. Sonic 3 has easily got the best looking effects out of the entire live action franchise and has the largest amount of effects driven sequences so far. The backgrounds and environments look absolutely incredible, the enhancements to some sequences work very well, and the characters themselves look so much more defined and detailed than ever before. Sonic, Shadow and the others do absolutely have a cartoonish style to them, but even in these realistic environments, they never look out of place. It is honestly incredible just how well and how accurately these characters have been translated to screen. Now, when it comes to the soundtrack, we have returning composer Tom Holkenborg, and I think he's heard our feedback. The soundtracks for the first two movies, including the Knuckles TV series, were definitely areas for improvement, and I think that finally they have fixed it. Not only is there a slightly more punkier vibe to the music and the song choices, the use of actual game themes has increased as well, and not just like little jingles or the piano cover of the theme for Green Hill Zone. Now, I won't spoil what is featured in this movie, but what I will say, they made me very happy. The soundtrack for this movie from Tom Holkenborg was really good overall. It sounded amazing on the big screen, and the song choices were really cool too. Also really cool on the big screen was the action sequences. This is the most action-packed movie so far in this franchise, and oh my god, the fights, the chases and other stuff in this movie are bloody spectacular. Not only are these sequences much bigger and more epic, they feel a lot more intense, especially when the stakes get heightened. This has fully embraced the over-the-top and fast-paced action that the games are known for. So much so that one sequence, and I kid you not, feels like something out of Dragon Ball. The action is still kept within a PG rating. This is still a PG rated movie. But even so, I do think that the intensity has been pushed a little bit further than the previous two films. It is absolutely spectacular and so much fun to watch. And for me as a fan, seeing and hearing so many things that happen in this, Easter eggs, references, callbacks, all sorts of things that relate to things that I grew up with or things that I'm familiar with, it just made me so happy and it put a gigantic smile on my face. I had an absolute blast with this movie. I loved getting to see this on the big screen and I was surrounded by fans as well. And I honestly believe that this was worth the wait. Overall, while not a flawless movie, this was so much fun and incredibly enjoyable. What they've done and where they have taken this franchise is really impressive, and in my opinion, this is easily the best of the series so far. It's darker and more tense, the characters are pushed to breaking point, and it culminates in one of the most satisfying finales of the past few months. The characters, both animal and human, the performances and voice performances, the visuals, the action, the CG effects, and the music are all genuinely great and builds off of what has come before. Yes, it can be a bit too silly at times. Yes, it could do with expanding on a few things and keeping a steadier pace. But with all that said, I truly had so much fun with this movie, both as a casual moviegoer and as a fan. I honestly would highly recommend seeing this film if you can. I don't think that you need to see the previous films to enjoy this, but it would help fill in some gaps. For fans though, this is everything that you could want and more. It is a proper love letter to Sonic Adventure 2, and I guarantee that you will love what they have in store. This is a brilliant film that I think the whole family will enjoy. I had a blast, I have seen it twice in cinemas, and I will definitely see it again. So with all that being said, my rating for Sonic the Hedgehog 3 is a 7 out of 10. Well, I think that is pretty much everything I want to say for this video, so if you have watched this video, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoy this content, please be sure to like, subscribe and hit that notification button. If you have seen Sonic the Hedgehog 3, let me know down in the comments what you think about it. Plus, if you have any suggestions for any future Rewind reviews you would like to see me do, let me know down below. And please keep an eye out for my spoiler talk for Sonic the Hedgehog 3. There's a lot that I do want to talk about. There's Easter eggs, references, theories for Sonic the Hedgehog 4, which has been confirmed. All sorts of things that I really want to talk about, so keep an eye out for it. But until next time, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for supporting me and this channel, and I shall see you in the next video. See you guys.